All right, everybody. Thank you all for being here. Let me start off by giving a huge thank you to Gerd. Is Gerd here? Gerd, there you are. Gerd, thank you for graciously allowing us to come at no cost to be able to do this presentation and to show off the facility to the panel and to the few folks that may not have seen it before. So thank you for that. Thank you all very much. So just real quickly, I wanted to speak on behalf of Lafayette and the citizens to really just again thank the panel for everything that you've done, taking time out of your work, away from your families to come spend a week in our town. And I know that y'all ate well, but I also know that y'all hold up in the hotels for 2 full days, cranking out the presentation that you're going to give us today. And so please know how much we do appreciate it. And so without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Tom Murphy, and it's all yours.
Good morning. Wow. Do you know, if you all got together right now and decided on where you wanted Lafayette to go, this crowd can make that happen. On a Friday morning, look at the crowd that's here because you care so deeply about your community. This is a remarkable testament to who you are. And we're honored to be here. We want to take a moment to thank the mayor, and Carly and her team and the others, all of you who've welcomed us so well here. And we have had the opportunity also to meet with over 100 people to talk about what their dreams are for Lafayette. And so we very much appreciate all of you being here. So who are we? We are an organization called the Urban Land Institute. And we're here in part because the Kresge Foundation funded ULI to work with communities around the country on resiliency, about how communities change, and we'll talk about that some more. The Urban Land Institute was founded in 1936 by a group of developers that were very simply worried about the quality of the development happening around America. And fast forward, the organization, a nonprofit organization, think tank, has grown to be 40,000 members around the world. About a third of us are people involved in the finance of real estate. About a third of us are involved in developing real estate. And a third of us are architects and public officials and planners who care deeply about how communities work. And what we do is we educate people. We don't lobby. We have conferences. We do publications. And one of the things we do are these advisory panels. And the advisory services panels are about coming out and being invited by a community or a developer or a nonprofit organization to look at a particular real estate challenge in a community. And we were invited by the city to come to look at the challenges that you're facing, that in many ways is challenges that every city is facing. And so we do a tour, we interview, as I mentioned, we interview over 100 people, and then we lock ourselves in a room for 2 days and from our own experience come up with ideas. And who are we? We are a group of people. We're all volunteers. The panelists are all volunteers. We represent 11 cities, so we come here, many of us not knowing each other, and we bond, or we don't, but this week we really bonded, and I think your nightlife was helpful in that, and we ended up working really well together, and we develop what we think from our own experience and what we heard from all of you, ideas that we think that are worth pursuing. So this is who we are. I won't go through the names. As I mentioned, we're from 11 different cities all across America, in the South, the North, in the West. And so as I mentioned, the Kresge Foundation particularly has founded a resilience program. Resilience is a word about basically about change, about how do communities respond to environmental challenges, to economic challenges, the social challenges that are threatening the fabric or challenging the fabric of their community. And I'm going to tell you, every city in America is facing those challenges. And so before we come here, the sponsors, in this case the city, gives us a briefing book, but also gives us a series of questions that they want us to answer. And these are the questions. How do we build a better downtown, make better connections? What kind of development should we be thinking about doing downtown, and how do we finance that? With public-private partnerships. And we particularly focused on 3 sites, the Lourdes site, the Iberia Bank site, and the old courthouse site. And what do you do with those? And then the question of the university is a remarkable institution, and it has 17,000 people who in many ways are your customers, who you ought to be working every day about keeping them here, building an economy and a city that makes them want to stay. And so that is an important thing. And how do you do financing and public-private partnerships, which you've not historically done a whole lot of, and how does that happen? And you had a terrible rainstorm even yesterday in a couple areas of the county. And so how do you prepare for that? What do you begin to think about doing to do that? And then finally, how do you organize yourselves, the city and many nonprofit groups that you have, how do you organize yourself to succeed, to be as efficient as you can be? And so we're going to make those recommendations, and then we'll be happy to take questions after we're done. And we're going to start with Betty, who's going to answer the question of how do you knit together not just the downtown, but the surrounding 3 neighborhoods immediately adjacent to downtown and the university into a really vibrant community. Betty?
Well, good morning. As Tom told you, last Tuesday we spent the day interviewing about 100 Lafayette residents. Some of you are here today. We chose 10 of you, and we asked you to show us on a map where downtown Lafayette was located. As you can imagine, we asked 10 people. We got 10 different answers, and my colleague here will talk about that.
Thank you, Betty. Good morning. So, perception of downtown. As Betty mentioned, we talked with a lot of folks in town, and in the next minute or so, we're going to go through a progression of what people's perception of downtown is. So to start with, when we talk about downtown, people were saying that Jefferson Street is the main spine, and in their mind, the densest part, the core of downtown, is one property on each side of Jefferson. Yet others said that it is a little bit wider, but still constrained within 2 to 3 blocks on either side of Jefferson. And many felt that downtown is bounded by Congress, University, Johnston, and Cypress. And because it's a challenge to cross those big roads visually, physically, and perception-wise. You have these historic neighborhoods on all sides of downtown, the Macomb-Vesey, the La Place, the Saint Streets, and the Freetown, Puerto Rico. And you have the beautiful campus of University of Lafayette. They are not well connected. We have also heard that the perception is, like I said before, it is not porous. It is not well connected. They want that porosity so that a healthy and connected downtown is good for the city and vice versa. With that said, I'm going to hand it over to Betty so that she can talk about the neighborhood recommendations.
Whatever happens in downtown Lafayette, whatever we recommend, whatever you decide you're going to implement, has ripple effects that will stretch throughout your community. But those ripple effects have the potential to become big waves in 3 of the neighborhoods that are adjacent to your downtown: La Place, Macomb-Vesey, and Freetown, Puerto Rico. When we talk about downtown, We need to be looking certainly what's in front of us, but we also need to look at what's behind us. We need to harness the opportunities, strengthen the connections, and mitigate the challenges in Lafayette's core historic neighborhoods. Go ahead. Go one more. I am not adept at PowerPoints. Macomb-Visay is separated from the downtown by railroad tracks, by the Evangeline corridor, and at some yet to be determined point in the future by an interstate highway. That highway corridor can be a barrier, or it can help connect the neighborhoods to each other. Our recommendation to Lafayette is to get the best design possible for that interstate, looking at access and landscaping and noise mitigation, public art, wayfinding. Your neighborhoods, and in fact the whole city of Lafayette, deserves a really good design for that highway corridor. The Freetown Puerto Rico neighborhood has the downtown as a neighbor, but it also has the University of Louisiana at Lafayette. We had opportunities to drive through that campus several times during the week, and it is beautiful. It's well maintained, it's well landscaped. Whoever over the years integrated the new construction with the older buildings did a really good job. The university is a huge asset to this community. The university's master plan calls for the acquisition of the old Lord's property in order to connect two parts of the campus. We would encourage the city of Lafayette to partner with the university and with the Lord's property owner and help make that deal happen. A mixed-use, university-driven, community-conscious development on that Lord's property simply makes good sense. LaPlace, as we understand it, is actually an amalgamation of several smaller neighborhoods, and our understanding is there are actually 2 active neighborhood associations in that area. Where LaPlace abuts downtown, you've already begun to see some infill housing happening. There are vacant lots just begging for development. It seems to be the low-hanging fruit for movement from the downtown into redevelopment in a neighborhood. Like so many cities, Lafayette's done a lot of planning. You have planned again, you've planned to plan. Now it's time for action, and we have 4 very specific recommendations related to these 3 historic heart of Lafayette neighborhoods. Mayor, you're going to have a busy day on Monday, but I hope you will be able to make time to pick up the phone and call representatives from those 3 neighborhoods, neighborhood associations, and set up a meeting to talk about how the city of Lafayette redefines its relationship with those neighborhoods, and conversely, how those neighborhoods redefine their relationship with the city, how they move toward self-improvement and self-empowerment. Assuming that meeting is successful, then in our minds, the next step is a City Hall summit on these heart of Lafayette neighborhoods, bringing together people and organizations who provides impactful services in those neighborhoods, Habitat for Humanity, Rebuilding Together, city parks and rec and code enforcement, Lafayette Community Foundation, and small private developers who could potentially do infill housing in those neighborhoods to start to build partnerships and commitments to these three areas. Building or rebuilding a resilient city isn't just about building streets and houses and putting green space in a city. It's also about rebuilding its human capital, its people. And so we would encourage the city to include organizations like the United Way and United Way agencies, Catholic charities, people who can work impactfully with the residents who live in these neighborhoods. It's our understanding that the city planning department is undergoing a reorganization. What we would encourage you to identify, fund, and put in place is a neighborhood services director who, when that individual gets up in the morning and puts his or her feet on the ground, they're thinking about bringing resources to and putting programs in Laplace, Macomb-Vizay, and Freetown, Puerto Rico neighborhoods. At the same time, that individual would be working with the coteries and neighborhood associations toward a higher level of self-sufficiency in those neighborhoods, and that brings the fourth recommendation. We would suggest that the three neighborhoods band together to form a Lafayette Community Development Corporation that eventually would have the potential to work in any neighborhood in Lafayette. But in those first 2, 3, 4, 5 years of operation, they would be concentrated in these historic neighborhoods. Reclaiming Lafayette's the heart of this city, its historic urban neighborhoods, needs to go hand in glove with the redevelopment of downtown Lafayette. And I'm now going to turn it over to Nancy and Nan, who will move along on that subject.
Well, as Betty said, we've seen a lot of plans. You've got them, but you also have the assets. This is a beautiful downtown. You should be very proud. You've got great architecture, you have restaurants, look at this place. You have entertainment, you have fiber, you have all of the elements that a lot of other cities just have to build from scratch. But what you need to do now is really work on those details and really create that critical mass of what's going to be necessary to make sure that this is elevated into one of the most vibrant and dynamic downtowns in the country. But it's a sense of urgency we see right now. A vibrant downtown is important to your economic health. It is the workforce of the future that's going to demand that we have alternatives. It's not one or the other. It's not about downtown versus another location. It's about you're the hub of this region, so you need to have choices, but downtown is incredibly important. So let's look at some of the details. Now, we're going to preface, we're going to run very quickly. First, it's going to require that the city assumes a greater role in some of these things, and we're going to have a lot more details in a report, so we're just hitting the highlights at this point. Fundamentally, clean, safe, walkable, that's got to happen. And when we talk about policing, I'm not just talking about the policing aspect. It's about safety in general. It's about the design of safety. We heard a lot about the bar moratorium. If in fact it is a moratorium, but whatever, just get rid of it and really deal with a nightlife. Let's just look at a nightlife management plan. Something, and we'll provide some ideas in the report. it's not about the use, it's about how it's managed. And the fundamentals of maintenance. Okay, we've got to step up. We've got to step up some of the code enforcement here. And there's the stick, but there's also the carrot you can look at. It's how to transform some of the properties into what you want to see. This is just an example in Greenville, South Carolina. And parking. I tell you what, I spend a lot of time in downtown. There's never enough parking, according to the people who come. But you got a lot of parking here. They're in surface lots. You need to take a look at those lots. And first and foremost, they break up some of the urban fabric of downtown. So take a look at, in the interim, take a look at doing some more screening of those parking lots and ultimately turn those over into productive commercial use, saving your parking for some of your structures. And by the way, when you're looking at your structures, let's make sure that they're designed in such a way. I know parking people want to see them. We in the urban world want to see them covered up. So let's take a look at how we can do that. And it's also making sure that those parking structures are very strategically located. You want to use those parking garages as an incentive. It is an excellent economic development incentive to really work on not only new projects, but infill all along the way. Streetscape, signage, and walkability. A downtown has got to be walkable. It's fine-tuning. You've got a great start on your streetscapes. But let's look at kind of enhancing that a little bit more with planning areas. Avoiding signage, really focus on signage as, and help lead pedestrians to the side streets. As we walk downtown and after you get off Jefferson, you look down and you see some really great enticing spots to go. Help make people really want to go down there because there's a lot to be seen. But it's making this experience memorable and the importance of walkability and taking your feet where your eyes want to go. And it's not just about the connections that Security talked about with connecting the neighborhoods back into downtown. It's also about connecting the streets in downtown. Security.
Thank you, Nancy. So to add on to what Nancy was making a recommendation, to have a healthy downtown, you have to have a healthy core, which is Jefferson Street. And a couple of things that we wanted to point out. One is the edges and the gateways, and then the idea about these venues or nodes of activity as you go along Jefferson. Because the configuration of Jefferson is such that when we're walking down the street during our site tour earlier in the week, you are hitting a terminus point and then going around the bends, if this clicker is working. If you're coming down, you're hitting that bend and then going around and hitting another point. So it's about having those physical, small-scale interventions like signage, like lighting a sculpture, public art, added greening, landscaping. Use those small-scale interventions to act as a catalyst for development and redevelopment in those areas so that people are attracted from the gateways and edges with landmarks. You have done a good job on some of those areas, and with the Rock and Bowl coming to the south end of Jefferson Street, it is going to activate that area even more. But those small-scale interventions will really help people to have those visual cues as they go up and down Jefferson Street and keep a very enjoyable and indelible memory in their minds, and they could love downtown.
Sorry for that switch off here. Outdoor dining. This is a foodie place, and you want to celebrate that. You've already started with outdoor dining. Do more. That's where people want to be. Pull them out into the street.
Which one am I using? That one. So good morning, everybody, and I just want to build a little bit, and as Nancy said, we're going through things very quickly, and in our report, we'll have a lot more detail for you, and please also know that Carly and the mayor and others on staff are more than welcome, and those of you running the other organizations are more than welcome to reach out to us afterward. A lot of these types of programs we've all done, and please know we've all been there before too, right? We've been successful in some things and not so successful in other things in our own city. So please know you're not alone. A huge part of what downtown should be is a vibrant and active place. It has visual interest points, as we just mentioned. It has nodes of activity sprinkled throughout so that you're continually drawing people through the corridor. And most importantly, there's a sense of community engagement, that all of you, as Tom said earlier, are working together on this aspect. And finally, really looking at programs of all types so that you're attracting all sorts of different folks. A diverse city and a diverse downtown is a resilient one because you're not relying on any one population, you're not relying on any one restaurant or use. So you need to really think about the diversity of what's going on in your downtown. When we talk about visitors too, I just want to make sure that's whether or not you're showing up there for work or whether you're in town like we are for the week as tourists, but that visitors or anybody that's stepping foot in your downtown needs to have as positive of an experience as possible. So when we talk about marketing, there's a lot of marketing that goes on. There's a lot of traditional marketing, websites, and now social media over the past number of years. You all are doing a great job with that, and I would encourage you to continue to do more cross-promotion so that you all are promoting downtown and that you're promoting each other's roles in downtown, not competing with one another, but actually working together on that. And we'd also recommend that you really try to continue to differentiate yourself in downtown from the big box experience. That's what a downtown is about. It shouldn't be something that I can fly to Tulsa, Oklahoma and get the same experience there. You are very unique and different. Capitalize on that and market the daylights out of it. And try different kinds of things that you haven't tried before too. Community engagement, programming, events, these are all special things. We've got yoga classes, obviously, are hugely important. I hear those are going on actually already. Different types of activities. Reach out and use your different partners. You have so many partners here that do all types of different things. You have churches, nonprofits, your arts groups, the University of Louisiana. Each of those groups brings a different type of person to downtown. So look at the ways that you can do things with those groups and make them uniquely yours. Make them something that nobody can get at another place. Maybe it's crawdad races. Maybe it's, and you laugh, we do these in Baltimore. We have crab races and we have the turtle derby. So they're a uniquely Baltimore thing. Food truck festivals, silent disco, dance night, skate park. I saw that there were a couple of photos we saw in Street View that had kids in skate parks. Set up a temporary skate park and see if there's a need for it. Set up a dog bath. Whatever it might be that you think works, go for it. Art is key to activating downtown. Make it interactive and fun. Make it specific to you as a community and to your interests. And then also be thinking about using lighting as art, right? And so you have a great spot on the downtown corner, or on the corner in there. Use it as something to draw the eye. Again, as Nancy and Sukriti were talking about, you always want to be drawn down the block in a different way. You have a number of vacant storefronts, and there are a lot of different ways that you can seek to activate those while your property owners and your economic development folks are recruiting retailers. Look to do artwork in the windows at a bare minimum if you can, and if possible, do pop-up galleries. You have an arts community here that I think would be more than happy to participate in that, and we've got a couple of programs that we've done over the years that I'd be happy to share with you. And then also really using those storefront merchandising. You want those windows to be as attractive as possible and as engaging as possible, and what we've always found is that the holidays and seasonal times are always great times to get people really excited about doing that and getting retailers and restaurants involved with that. So with that, Nancy's going to talk about the catalytic projects.
Okay, you asked us to look at 3 different sites, but being the practitioners that we are, we always look at other things too. So Betty has already talked about the Lord's property. We also took a look at the Iberia Bank site, the old courthouse site, and we added 2 more. Now, one thing I want to preface is taking a look at these is going to require a little bit different approach. I think we're going to have to embrace a more proactive and entrepreneurial approach to downtown development, particularly from the public side. So, the Iberia Bank site. We think this, and it would be a great higher density residential, which can really transition from the urban core. and really bring that population base back into downtown that you really need. The old courthouse site, enough about talking about it. That was another one we heard a lot about. Just get going with it. It's time. To put this into a productive mixed-use development, and you're going to hear more about from our other panelists how to make that happen. We also looked at, while we were looking at the courthouse site, we couldn't help but look across the street at a vacant parking, well, it wasn't a vacant parking lot, it was a parking lot and a parking structure. We heard a lot about a need for a new Performing Arts Center, or an expanded and updated Performing Arts Center. And you know what? We think it ought to be downtown. And we thought this might be a good site to explore. Taking the parking, and you're going to have to put parking somewhere else, but put parking where it can be strategically located. What you don't want people just coming directly to the Performing Arts Center. What you want them to do is park in different places so that you can take advantage of an event, not only the event, but going out to the restaurants before and after. We did this in Greenville. If you can see what we started with, and today our Performing Arts Center has gone through its second major renovation. It has been a tremendous catalyst for downtown, not just for the visitors, but for people living downtown. And then we looked up at we couldn't help but notice along Jefferson and Congress, there was this great piece of property that most people probably just look over with some vacant warehouses. We saw that as a great opportunity. We heard a lot about tech companies wanting to be downtown and wanting their employees wanting to be downtown. What a cool space this could be, not only for tech space, but also for mixed use. And this is just an example of what was done in downtown Charleston.
So everybody loves the big, gorgeous, amazing projects that all take time, and that we have some more information on those. And those are fantastic, and they are major catalytic drivers and major anchors throughout your downtown. But we can't forget the infill development, the redevelopment, the adaptive reuse of historic buildings is also incredibly important. You can capitalize on great historic stock. You have some really unique buildings throughout downtown. You can also capitalize on the existing infrastructure, as well as your, again, unique character to downtown that looks different, feels different, and behaves differently. There's a sense of authenticity, and redoing some of those existing buildings and then filling in also really helps to do that. And again, it's about that balance of uses throughout downtown and really creating a mixed use downtown, and also activating those upper floors. Some are more appropriate for apartments, some will be more appropriate for office or other uses, but really getting those buildings filled and activated is important. We did pick a few key sites as well for infill development and reuse. The Children's Museum, we understand there's some work being done to possibly put residential up there. We think that's a great project. Jefferson Street, you should be looking at any and all of the buildings, working with your building owners to see if you can add 1 or 2 apartments even just to a building. Makes a huge difference because you have more people coming in. Again, striving to be not necessarily 24 hours, but at least 18 hours a day that you have people kind of coming and going. And surface parking lots. I know Nancy mentioned those, and we've talked about those a little bit. Work on developing those surface parking lots. The one across from Marty's, for example, is a good opportunity to maybe add a few stories and build off of what you have across the street at the restaurant that I'm forgetting the name of. Sorry. The pictures that you see here are actually, we're going to talk a little bit about activating side streets. We've mentioned it before. If you're going to be working on the Children's Museum and activating those upper floors, and then you've also got the Science Center, those are 2 anchors for you in downtown. And unfortunately, the current experience from Jefferson Street looking down to those locations in Sanssouci Park are not the most inviting. So we'd encourage you again to create those visual nodes, not just on Jefferson Street, but also on your side streets. If you're going to put people upstairs, help them have an experience that they want to have when they walk home to their apartment too. We also highly recommend you all band together and work as a group to recruit your retailers. It's not just one person's job, and it certainly isn't just the building owner's job. Work on carefully marketing to a whole host of operators. The market will generally dictate what wants to go where, but make sure that you're encouraging a variety of uses. And again, the more users, the more types of experiences you have, the more diverse you are, the more resilient you are. And again, with those side streets, really working with those as well. Finally, really looking at various toolkits. If I were to come here and want to open a business, what do I know about that process? Who do I go to? How do I get a permit? What do I do about a loading zone? All of those types of things are incredibly important for people to know and understand. So put yourselves in the shoes of someone who's been here for the very first time and doesn't know where to go. Start developing the tools that they need, like a facade improvement grant, historic preservation tax credits information, on and on. Create new programs that are potentially uniquely your downtown's incentives. So work on those and create a resource booklet so that folks know what they need. And again, happy to provide examples of those and offer advice on them. So Nancy and I and the whole panel obviously feel really strongly that we could give you a list 4 million miles long, and we could probably do it for each of our own cities as well. And we could talk all day long about the results of what's been positive and negative in our own respective cities. But we've been there, and we have faith that you already have a lot of the tools to do what you need to do. You're going to create those anchors. You're going to activate your first and upper floors. You're going to have great events and programs. You already have some great events and programs. And continue to create that solid base for what you have so that you can improve what's already here and build more and build new. So the next question becomes, now that you've got this 4 million page list, how do you actually make it happen financially? So Tyrone and Lex are going to talk about how you involve the whole community in the redevelopment and improving your return on investment.
Thanks, Nan. I appreciate it. Good morning, everybody. How y'all doing today? We didn't tell you, but we planted a money tree downtown that's going to pay for all this. It's amazing. I spent a lot of my time in Atlanta, and I ran redevelopment for the city of Atlanta in a former lifetime, and there are a lot of things that you can do. A lot of folks want a lot of things, but how do you pay for it? How do you get all this done? There are tools. You're in luck, and many cities employ these tools very aggressively. And I want to talk to you today about a particular set of tools, which is public-private partnership. What types of activities can we encourage creative alliances between the public and private sectors, really to achieve a common purpose? It's that simple. Now, while there are different types of P3 arrangements, I really want to talk to you about the ones that really focus on activating a particular real estate asset or changing an area. That's something that is really hard to get done. If it were easy, it had been done already, right? So what kind of tools and what kind of frameworks can we think about really to accomplish some of the goals that you have right down here downtown? Revitalization. We're trying to attract housing. What comes first, housing or retail? You guys have a fair amount of retail downtown, but I think as you get more vibrancy and more people on the streets, there are going to be more opportunities. I want to be the first one to come down here and open up a little coffee shop down the street and catch all these people that are moving in. And you want to create catalytic impact, because that's where I think all boats rise, when you're able to do something that has a halo effect and actually changes the area around it. And that's really the types of things that I think I would try to encourage to you. Now there's one thing that we got to talk about, and any time you hear tax in front of something, folks start to get a little worried. But I really want to talk about a perspective of not the tax man, but the public sector as an entrepreneur. Really? An entrepreneurial mindset where the public sector is actually looking for a return just like the private investor. I mean, when you make an investment, the mindset is, oh, the government spent some more money and they're wasting it. But if you think about it as an investment and you get a return on that investment, it's not a giveaway, right? It's not a giveaway. And I find that particularly in my state, where tax is a bad word, it's very difficult to get people to understand. But when you reframe these discussions as investments and putting your money where your mouth is, you can measure that return in many different ways. One is a a return on investment that you can measure numerically, right? And you can figure out what that value is, but also there are intangibles that are at play where they're harder to measure, but just as important. So smart partnership is going to be required to do all of this, and it really does take a different mindset. And it's been effectively used in other cities and important. So how do we start thinking about this? Well, there's a real problem, right? If you're trying to attract development to your downtown, let's take this courthouse building, which I agree, we should get that thing done and started. The problem is there's a significant upfront investment for a private developer team that's coming in to think about this. I mean, hundreds of thousands of dollars could be spent just getting an idea of what you want to do. That's risk. And we want to talk about the way that risk is allocated and shared, and with any partnership, we're trying to accomplish a goal. The revenue from those projects, when that property is back on the tax rolls, there's a gap that happens 24, 36 months later, right? So how do we help bridge that gap a little bit? That's where some of these tools that I want to talk to you about will be helpful in partnering with the private sector to get these things done. The benefits, obviously, in this framework are overcoming barriers and risk are really the types of ways in which the public sector can help the private sector get things activated. Obviously, we're trying to increase project value. Lowering the cost of capital is one of the most significant things you can do for a private developer because that helps make the deal go. And it's extremely important to do that, and obviously we want to be smart about reducing net project costs. And we're going to run through an example on the old courthouse site so that you can see how we think about different tools and how we get these things started. I'm not going to go through this alphabet list of tools, but you guys use several of them here. You know, use a sales tax TIF here. We can't do that in Georgia. Everything we do is ad valorem. So we have gotten to a point where we have created large redevelopment districts, and with the increment, which is the increase in property tax from new development, we're able to bond against that future increment to have money today. So that timing gap that I talked to you about, it's really important to be creative about this. But I'm going to leave that up there so you can see it, but really the tools that I want to talk to you about are not the ones that you locally pay for, but they're federal tools out there that can be attracted to your community, and we've done it effectively in the city of Atlanta. The New Markets Tax Credit, you are in an environment in the state of Louisiana where there is amazing capital resources for you. Now, I don't know if they're coming to Lafayette, but I'm from New Orleans, and Lex works in New Orleans. We see this tool used all the time, historic tax credit equity, New Markets tax credits. They can be used to help reduce that cost of capital and make that project less risky to the developer. But there's an alphabet soup of these, and this isn't even all of them. This is just a few. The tax credit tools are extremely effective. As I mentioned before, New Markets Tax Credit is a federal program where you're not even getting money from the federal government. It's the ability to offer a private investor a tax credit over 7 years that then you can monetize. We actually created one in the city of Atlanta that the city owned through our development authority, and I ran that tax credit fund, and we went from 0 to 200 million, I think it was in 3 years. And we were in the driver's seat when it came to making these mezzanine loan investments. That's very important. Now, you don't have to go all the way to that end of the risk spectrum and create your own, because there are several what we call community development entities here, CDEs, that already have allocation, and it's just getting them interested in your city in projects that are happening through the private investment community. There are other tools also which are going to be important. The one I really want to focus on here is land conveyance, particularly when a public sector entity owns the land. Guess what? It's not on the tax rolls. It's not even contributing and supporting its own weight. So there is a way in which we can convey land to put it back into service where it might not be selling it for the highest price now. It may be a promissory note where the developer helps pay over time or participating in the success of the project. But it's a way to think about activating real estate that really isn't contributing to the tax rolls currently. Now, the important thing now is how much is enough, right? I mean, a developer will tell you, yeah, I need $100 million, and You need to be smart about this, because where eligible costs, financing capacity of any district that you do, and the need for feasibility, where those meet, you want to be very smart to incentivize projects so that it has just enough so that the developer has the returns that they need to make this go. And we're smart people. We can look at capital stacks just like anybody else, look at the pro forma, estimate what type of required return is necessary to make those projects happen. And this, we call this the but-for test. We have a responsibility in Atlanta that any type of tool we use, we have to be responsible in how we use that tool, because we're trying to maximize impact across the city. But I want to leave that with you, and we're going to walk through a little example, and Lex is going to, the developer is going to show you how he does it.
Thank you, Tyrone. What I do want to do is to make essentially an object lesson in how, thank you, and how the tools Tyrone talked about can be used to encourage, basically for the public sector, to encourage private sector investment in Lafayette. The example we chose, and it is just an example, is the redevelopment of the old federal courthouse on Jefferson Street. And we used, one of the reasons that we use that is that the DDA commissioned the Centreville site development study a few years back, and it had data in it, and it had plans in it, and estimates in it that we could use for the purpose. Option one in that plan called for the development of 158,000 square feet of new and renovated building in that block. And that's what I want to address right now. So we estimated the basic economics of the project, a total development cost of $30.9 million. And you can see up here the big blue block. That's the construction part of the expense. That's 70% of the expenses going to construction. But there's also the purchase price of the property. There's developer fee. There's the finance cost during construction. And then for this particular site, the study looked at a number of streetscape and site preparation expenses that someone was going to have to do. There's part of the building that would be demolished. That costs money. The streetscape needs to be restored after it's done. That's going to cost some money. And we're estimating the entire thing comes in at about $30.9 million. So if I'm a developer, I am a developer, I look at this, I'm looking at the right-hand column, which is a big blank, and saying I've got to finance that. But that's true even if it's a public sector entrepreneur doing the project. It's true even if it's a public-private partnership, that these are the things that have to be paid for, and we need to know how we're going to do it. So the traditional sources of financing for real estate projects are investors' equity and bank loans. How much can we get out of these sources? Both the investors and the bank are going to look at the financial returns from the project to figure out how much they're willing to put in. So if it's going to be condos, they look at how much we're going to get from selling them. If it's going to be retail, how much we're going to get from the leases. If it's going to be apartments, how much we're going to get from the rent on the apartments. How is that going to work out? What are we willing to put into this project in order to get that income stream? Our estimate here is that investors would be willing to put up about $2.5 million for this project, and banks would be willing to lend about $21.6 million. There are a number of criteria that both of those use, and this is inexact, but that's probably a pretty good ballpark. The problem with that is that in this case, that leaves a gap of $6.8 million. So if you only have the traditional sources, this project's not going to get done because there's still $6.8 million somebody's going to have to come up with. So Tyrone talked about a number of financing tools that both the public sector and the private sector can use. In this case, we modeled how much you could get from New Markets tax credits and how much you could get from both federal and Louisiana historic tax credits. We have looked, and the old federal courthouse site is eligible for all three of those. Together, the three programs bring $3 million of federal and state money to this project. And that's $3 million is a substantial chunk of change. In this case, it still leaves a $3.8 million gap that somebody's going to have to find to execute the project. So what other sources are there? Well, in this case, the city owns the property. So we asked what would happen if the city took on the streetscape, doing the streetscape improvements and doing the site preparation for the project. So this is basically saying working with the developer to figure out what needs to happen before construction can begin, and then coming in behind and saying, let's build out the streetscape so that it complements what's there and encourages people to use it. In addition, this would call for selling the property to the developer for $1. In this case, the total contribution of the city would be $3.6 million. It turns out, and I don't know whether you can believe me, but I did not jimmy these numbers. That's exactly how much you need to get this project done, is for someone to carry those and make it a viable project. So the city could do this, the city could do this, but then the question is, should it? Should it contribute $3.6 million of essentially taxpayers' money to this project? So what we believe, and I'm going to echo what some of my colleagues have said, is that the city ought to think like a public entrepreneur in making these decisions. Entrepreneurs, when they evaluate a project, look at what the potential returns from that are, and ask, what are we going to get out of that? So a really good project will have a high financial return on investment. It'll catalyze additional investment and activity nearby, so that it basically means that without a lot of additional city money, other things are going to happen. And it has spillover effects, which the spillover effects could be streetscape improvements, it could be improvements to health, it could be tax revenues from sales tax, and other benefits to the city. So we asked, what is the return on investment for this project? So first of all, the city gets a $30.9 million project for putting in $3.6 million of city contribution. That's an 850% return on the city's investment right off the top. It also puts the block back on the tax rolls. Right now, it's tax exempt. The city owns it. So we used the assessor's online tax estimator and said if this building went back into service, and it projected that this project on that site, on that entire block, would generate $409,000 a year in tax revenue. That's 11% return on what the city has contributed to the project. In addition, there'll be spillover effects, sales tax revenue from the retail, people on the street, so street safety, the attractiveness of the city, 94 housing units. So 94 families that have housing. And in addition, we could have a whole lecture on this by itself, but the city can structure its agreement for putting in its contribution so that if the project succeeds gangbusters and it's really a home run, that the city gets some additional financial compensation down the pike for having essentially been the piece that made it happen. So this is an example. It's one of many. There's some assumptions in here. There are estimates in here to really evaluate this. Say, is this really the right thing to do? We need to get out sharp pencils, do our research, and get that down. But I think it is an example of how the public sector can use strategic investments to get projects done by the private sector here in Lafayette. So I want to ask, one of the other things we need to consider just globally in Lafayette is the flooding and drainage problems. And ask Denise Bell, my colleague, to address that. Denise has the advantage of having done it already in Birmingham.
Thank you, Lex. Good morning. Okay, so we all agree we have a flooding problem. But I think we should look at a smarter approach to dealing with that problem and have some built-in resilience for the future. So one great approach that we want to talk to you about today is green infrastructure. So what is green infrastructure? It's an alternative to gray infrastructure, which is your hard rooftops, your impervious pavement that we saw a lot of this week, and your pipe system. It is attractive, it's natural in nature, and includes things such as bioswales and rain gardens. I won't list all of those, you can see them. So what are the benefits to having a green infrastructure? Flood risk mitigation for small storm events, which you have a lot here. Increased resiliency and the quality of life. I can go on, but we only have a few minutes. Okay, so this is an example of Jefferson Street. We've heard a lot about Jefferson Street. So let's talk about what else can we add to Jefferson Street, basically. So what you have at the top is the existing Jefferson Street. Wide sidewalks, wide, not the best looking sidewalks, just to be honest. So you can see, and this happens all over the United States, not just here, but we've had to deal with the same issue. So you can see the proposal is that we add here some rain gardens, bust up some of those street areas, and put some rain gardens in those areas. Now, number one, it will help the water get down to where it needs to go quicker. Number two, it will actually give you a better quality of water, basically. And it will make your downtown look beautiful as well. So just adding those small little areas throughout the city will actually give you a big results. Then we have a coulee system, your existing coulee system. Let's really show you how Lafayette can really look. You can do this here. That's why we want to show you how beautiful this could really look and the dual purposes that you'll get when you implement green practices in your daily development strategies. This is how that same coulee can look. This is beautiful, guys. You can do this. You can do this. So here you have wetlands, stream, taking it back to its natural feature, its natural look, giving you guys something more than just a flood mitigation, but amenities that you really need here. I will tell you that I do understand that the hydrology does have to work here, but I promise you, you get a good firm, engineering firm, you can do this. You got people on your staff that's willing to do this and can do this. Okay, so how do we move? How do we get here? How do we move from gray to green? We basically consider adopting greener standards, low impact development standards. You got a lot of development going on across here. Some of it is a little bit sporadic, but you can actually incorporate some better practices and leave some of these subdivisions a little bit more greener instead of just building it all out. Look at your existing stormwater manuals and your existing flood damage prevention ordinance and see where you can incorporate some better practices. You do have great standards now, but as any community, you could stand to have a little bit more stricter requirements as you move in the more development stage. Increase public awareness. Educate your residents, not just your developers, but your residents on what is floodplain management, what is stormwater mitigation, why is drainage so important here in Lafayette. You have to educate. You can't just put it on your website and think they're going to go get it. You got to take it to them. Take the information to the community. Let them know what kind of services are here. Promote, encourage flood insurance. You have to do that. You cannot let your residents think that making them whole is coming to the city. Your insurance company's responsibility. And educate them about property-specific measures they can take themselves when they build in the floodplain to actually protect their own property. There are several techniques, and it'll be in the actual written report. So, here we have something that you did yourself. This is from the city. This is what you're paying, guys. Take a look at the red circle. For less than a mile, you're paying almost $10 million for infrastructure, drainage control, or maintenance. Well, not maintenance, just to actually build it. Maintaining it, you got to add another $250,000 a year. How are you paying for this? Shared problem, shared solution. You need a dedicated funding source, guys. You cannot continue to build using gray structures and believe that you're going to mitigate flooding. The more damage, the more burden you put on your system, the more flooding you will receive. So you need a dedicated funding source to retrofit your existing system to make sure that what's being built now is more greener in nature and less gray, and to maintain it. And you can use that for flood mitigation as well. So what am I calling it? I'm calling you, you're gonna need a new stormwater fee. I'm sorry, you need a fee. You're burdening the system. You're burdening the system. So if you live in Lafayette or the parish, that means you're burdening the system. The more you burden the system, I'm sorry, the more you need to pay. So these impervious surfaces that you see, you may need to think about making those people pay more because they're burdening the system. And make it fair, but make it fair. So what I say, you gotta change. If you continue to do things the same here, you're gonna get the same results and even worse flooding. So you gotta make a change, guys. And there's a nice quote that I want you to take a look at. And I'll let Julie talk about how to make some of those great changes.
Good morning, everyone. Wow. Wow. I think we've heard some great ideas this morning about what the community can do. And now you might be asking, great, who's going to do this? And looking around the room, you're going to do it, should you decide to do it. It's going to be you, all of you. I think we talked to many of you in the interviews. We talked to 100 people. So it's the people and it's the organizations. People and organizations get things done. And that's what we heard too. That's what we heard you say. And you've heard it from the panel this morning. That, okay, you've done the plans, you've done the studies, you've done the reports, you have that, and you're ready to go. You're ready to implement. We'd like to make a couple of recommendations. One is about your city staff, and the other will be about organizations in the community. Oh, I gotta move this, don't I? Okay. Our first recommendation is that the city hire an experienced senior level advisor to the mayor for development. Let me say that again. Hire an experienced senior level advisor to the mayor to deliver those major development projects that you just heard about. On the screen, we have two of them. We have the Iberia Bank site, exciting plan there, the former federal courthouse. Those are just two of those catalytic projects. There are other infill projects. This person would spearhead all of that. Now, what kind of qualifications, experience does this person need to have? If you were going to hire, let's say you hired an executive search firm to find this person, or let's just think about it like as a help wanted ad, shall we? What qualifications would they need to have? Well, first and foremost, you want someone who's done this before. And you want somebody who's done it in, every city is different. But you want someone who's done it in a place like this. And you want someone who's had a similar type of position before. The reason for that is what we're hearing is you want to get this done now, right? You don't want to wait. You don't want to let that person learn on the job. You want someone who can come in and hit the ground running on this. You want somebody, we believe, who's knowledgeable about all of these aspects. And as you've heard this morning, this can be kind of complicated stuff. It takes years and a lot of education to learn how to do all of this well. There are many skill sets, knowledge sets that this person has to have. They need to understand economic and business development. They need to understand real estate development and finance. Everything that Tyrone and Lex just covered, they will know that. The next one is attracting tourism and conventions, and we haven't talked a lot about that on this trip, but I believe it's vitally important to your economic diversification in this community. It can be one of the pillars of your local economy here, and so they really need to understand that. Downtown development and management. Nancy and Nan did a fantastic job of talking about all the elements of downtown development and management. They need to know that. Neighborhood and community development. Betty talked about that. She talked about how important the neighborhoods are to downtown. They are part of downtown. They're fundamental to the city, so this person would understand that. Infrastructure. Denise just talked about one really important aspect of that infrastructure, but this person would need to understand infrastructure, how it's developed, how it's maintained. And then I would say, last but not least, strategic partnerships. The city needs to be a lead player in all of this, but you never do it by yourself. You need many different institutions, players in the community involved, and they have to help. Okay. What else? What other qualifications do they have to have? Experience in working with decision makers at the highest level, in companies and other state government, local government, utilities, all of that. And I like to say they need to speak private sector and they need to speak public sector. Because we talked earlier about public-private partnerships. They have to understand public-private partnerships, and they are the translator between the two sectors. They're the facilitator. Sometimes they're the mediator, and so they need to understand that. Personal characteristics. What type of person do you want? I've heard you say, I think you want somebody with the highest level of personal integrity. Because this person is working on public projects and they would be using public funds. So that's very, very important. Last but not least on qualifications, I don't think it's mandatory, but it would be very nice if they had worked in a community with a major research university. And I think you've heard about that this morning in various pieces of our presentation. It's such an important asset and anchor for this community. And it's kind of a special skill set. So understanding those university partnerships is very, very important. Okay, let's say, oh, thank you. Okay. Let's say you have found this incredible person and you brought them on board. What do you want them to do? And some suggestions about initial priorities. They would assume responsibility for delivering these catalytic projects and infill development. They would pursue what I'm going to call a joint venture agreement with the university. And we've all learned that universities are about much more than academics. We're thinking technology and research support. We heard about you want tech jobs in your downtown. That could be a partnership with the university. Art, cultural, and performing art centers. We heard that that's a possibility, that perhaps the university places their performing arts center in downtown. What a catalyst that would be. Convention center. Today, your convention center is part of the university. Maybe and convention centers can be a great tourism driver. Maybe there's a partnership there. Student and faculty housing. We heard from you that you want residential development in your downtown. Perhaps there's an opportunity for maybe faculty housing in the downtown area. Last but not least, transportation and parking. Always important issues, critical to quality of life, a vital need, have to be heavily managed. Maybe there's some room there for that kind of partnership. Okay, third priority. Is this development advisor, senior development advisor, would act as the point person on development staffing. This is, I'm kind of talking about it as one person, but it's never just one person. You need an army, basically, to do this. Now, I'm not saying some of these people are probably already here. They're in your community. They're working in your organization. But to think about how to support, how do we get this stuff done that we've talked about this morning? I can't emphasize enough how important this person, this position, I should say, will be to your city's development success. Now I'm going to turn it over to Aletha, who's going to talk about organizations in the community.
Okay. All right, good morning. Thank you, Julie. Julie really highlighted the need for a point person focusing on citywide economic development initiatives. I'm going to bring it back down to a smaller scale and talk a little bit more about the organizations that help downtown develop. I don't think I need to tell most of you here in the room that downtowns are important. I'm excited to be here because downtowns are very near and dear to my heart. They're not only the heart of your community, they're the front door to government. And I'm sure many of you here have memories from different decades of watching downtown grow and develop. And now we have this new generation discovering downtown, so it's even more important today. And you have the benefit of this major university that has thousands of people cycling through on 4-year cycles every year, getting to know your downtown, and they're going to remember it one way or another, good or bad, right? So we want them to have a positive experience and want to stay here. Challenges to implementation. So everyone seems to agree there's a significant level of planning fatigue happening here in the community, but there doesn't seem to be that point person or agency in charge of implementing all of these plans. You also have somewhat of a unique issue of this kind of partially consolidated government. So you have to garner support from people all over the parish to get major initiatives done in downtown, which are not always people that have a vested interest in a successful downtown. But strategic investment in downtown really is important. It does add to the bottom line of the parish. What is it? Raising tides, raise all boats. And that's a story that really needs to be told here over and over again. Okay, so when we got to the community, we were kind of overwhelmed by the alphabet soup of economic development agencies. And I can tell you that's not unique to this community. You see that everywhere, but it is clear there are a lot of players in the economic development kind of sandbox here, and there seems to be a slight duplication of services. But the big issue, if I'm the person in the center and I have a vision and a little money and want to develop downtown, where would I start? Right now, you could pick any one of those, you could go talk to all of them together, but there doesn't seem to be an identified point person or agency. That's another reason that the position discussed by Julie is so important, because developers, especially small business developers, it is very likely they will start with City Hall, and there should be someone there that can answer their questions. Okay, so this is a very long, basic breakdown of SAM division of duties. This is not a recommendation in any way or shape or form. This is one way you could divide different responsibilities into 3 buckets. You can put these into 2, 5, 6, however many buckets you need, as long as it's identified and people, not only outsiders are clear, but everybody inside the system is clear on who's doing what, and everybody's kind of operating from a strength-based place where they're doing what they do best. The most important thing is that all of today's recommendations must also have specific owners so that these projects move forward. And most importantly, everybody has to have a shared vision. You have a lot of plans. It sounds like most are on board with kind of a vibrant downtown, bringing housing, getting control of the nightlife management issue, but you just make sure that you're still touching base. Don't just say, okay, planning is done, because planning has to be ongoing, even with the planning fatigue. Okay, so slightly separate issue, but it was very clear to us through our approximately 100 interviews. There does need to be some additional clarity to the role of the Downtown Development Authority. Because you have all those players doing bits and pieces of development, you really need to figure out what that niche is going to be for the DDA in future and current development activity. So we're not here to judge what has or has not been done in a 30-plus year agency. We can say it seems to have many positive attributes, including a significant millage, which a lot of downtown organizations would love to have a dedicated funding source at that amount. An ability to bond, whether or not it's being taken advantage of, and a pretty solid board that we've met, many of you, that are still engaged and have a lot of insight and professionalism to offer. But there are many risks if you do not address this issue, including continued frustration, conflicting visions, and an inefficiency of resources. There's almost also a guaranteed conflict coming down the road if and when you do hire that person at the city level doing development, if those roles are not clarified. Okay, so the good news is you're not alone. No downtown organization has ever been able to keep everyone happy. It's impossible. So you're basically trying to manage what equates to a small town with a very small staff and a limited budget. So you have thousands of daily residents that are bringing all the issues that a town brings, from housing to maintenance to entertainment. But downtown will never reach its full potential without figuring out this issue and clarifying the role of this organization. So unfortunately, I don't have a recommendation on how you do that. Our recommendation is that you have to do that. You just have to, you have to sit down and put in the hard work and the difficult conversations to really figure out what role this organization is going to continue to play. Okay, and then where do we start and how do we put this plan into action? So we met with many of you and it became very clear what types of projects and millage incentives did seem to work. So we heard about the library, the airport, fiber going in. And the themes that we heard over and over is that those were all projects that were well articulated, the plan was well articulated and understood, and it was very transparent. There were end dates, there were budgets. This is a community that wants to be informed. So please continue that whenever you're launching any of these major initiatives. And so Julie and I, you can tell we're at the end of the table, right? So we're wrapping up and how do you implement? So at a city level, you really need to align the authority and the responsibility with a sophisticated deal-making capacity and an understanding of those complex financial resources that Tyrone and Lex mentioned. That's imperative. And then at a downtown level, you really do need to take that hard look at the various roles of all of these economic development players and figure out the role of that DDA and solve that confusion. But most importantly, continue to set realistic expectations. This isn't going to happen overnight. Turning around a downtown, even one with yours that has such positive attributes, can take years. I mean, we've all seen it, right? And we're all still there, right? Okay. So I said, as a planner doing implementation, I don't know why, I generally end all my presentations talking about the importance of planning. But this is not an issue here. You understand that plans are important. You've been planning for years. Yeah. But if we continue to struggle with the implementation portion of the plan and the vision, you're not going to have a say on how this downtown turns out. You might have all the ideas in the world, but you're not helping guide the future of your downtown. So we're here to talk about resiliency, and resiliency is about being prepared and putting a plan into action. And we, as a panel, I think agree that the time to implement is now. So I'll turn it back over to Tom to give you some final thoughts.
So when you are downtown and you go by the courthouse, the old courthouse, what do you see? Maybe you don't even see it anymore. You just sort of go by it. Well, I want you to look at it. When you see that, I want you to see it as a monument of indecision. It has been there for 15 years. And the challenge that you have is that you need to be intentional. What Lafayette is going to succeed or fail because it's intentional, not because something good might or might not happen. We are at a moment in time when the world is fundamentally getting turned upside down. You live it every day with the oil industry. You're part of a global economy. In environmental issues, you're living it every rainstorm. Technological innovation, demographics, whether you're keeping your young people here or not, how you're making decisions about financing the future. And the most important thing, are you keeping the talent? 17,000 students a year are going to your school. You're developing talent, or you're keeping your sons and daughters here. And are you giving them a community where they will want to be? That's intentional. There are choices that you will make. Now, I'm going to tell you a quick story that I think captures where you are, where we all are. How many of you ever heard of Horatio Nelson Jackson? You all fail American history. Horatio Nelson Jackson was a doctor from Vermont, and he was in California at a medical convention out to dinner with a group of other doctors, and they were debating the impact of the automobile on American society. And Horatio thought it was going to be important, and all those other doctors, as smart as they were, thought it was really a toy for the rich. It was not going to have any big impact. And so he bet them all $50 that day he could drive across the United States in 90 days. And the very next day, he went out and bought his first car. He convinced the young mechanic, Seawall Crocker, to go with him. And for whatever reasons that day, they bought a dog named Bud. And the very next day, with no planning and no support, Seawall and Horatio and Bud are on their way driving across the United States. It was 1903. And in 1903, there were 8,000 cars in America, 150 miles of paved road, and no highway department in any state. 63 days later, Horatio, Seawall, and Bud drove down Fifth Avenue in New York City. They were the first people to drive across the United States. That was in 1903. By 1923, there were 10 million cars in the United States, hundreds of thousands of miles of paved road, and a highway department in every state. Society as we knew it changed completely. We're there now. You're living it. And the question is whether you're going to be one of those doctors or whether you're going to be Horatio. Whether you're going to understand that you need to reach for the future. And the key, as I mentioned, is the talent. So what do you think all these companies have in common? General Electric and Caterpillar and Rolls-Royce and McDonald's. In the last 2 years, they've all moved their headquarters into walkable urban neighborhoods. Why? Because they're chasing talent. You have that opportunity. We've tried to outline for you with our recommendations how to build on your remarkable assets and your can-do attitude with your fiber and the airport investments and the other investments you made. How do you build on that to build the kind of walkable, vibrant, exciting place where talent will want to stay? Where people will want to say, this is a community we want to be part. Whether it's doing the tech hub, whether it's doing downtown housing, whether it's doing culture in the arts. So our recommendations have dealt with a downtown strategy, about a financing menu of how you build effective public-private partnerships, about a government structure that gets things done. It focuses the resources you have, about how you connect to the surrounding neighborhoods where people will want to live, and how you manage the storm and use that storm management to build a green infrastructure that could be a model for communities all over the country. There are the choices, but it's all about choices, right? And this is where you are. You can go that way to change, which is always more difficult, or you can remain the same. And that's where you are. You know, and I was a mayor for 12 years in a city that had to go through remarkable change in Pittsburgh. And it's the best job in America, being mayor. But it is also a very stressful job. And so at the end of the day, what all this is about, it's about leadership. It's about, and you have a new mayor, who I believe can demonstrate that leadership. But he needs a team behind him. He understands how to bring people together. You know, and I learned this as mayor, is that every time you want to do something new, there's going to be at least 100 people giving you a reason why you can't do it. You know, it's the wrong color, it's the wrong place, and nobody's going to go there, and it costs too much money. You can have those discussions, but you can't, at the end of the day, look at your monument of indecision and do nothing. You need to move. You need to make a choice. Are you going to reach for the future, or are you going to sort of stay comfortable with the status quo? You have a mayor that wants to lead. He needs support. Get behind him. Reach for the future. Do it. Good luck. I'll hit you. Do we have questions? Any questions? We're going to do in a couple months, you'll have a 30 or 40, maybe a 50-page, because these guys wrote a lot, a report that will detail, we did one deal, sort of to give you an example. There'll be two in there. We're looking at the Iberville Bank property as another potential deal and try to do a model financing for that. So, yes, do you have a question?
How did you get rammed to go to Pittsburgh?
How did I what?
How did you get rammed to go to Pittsburgh?
this is about intentionality. The question is RAND Corporation. It's a think tank that's in Santa Monica, and why would a company from Santa Monica ever want to come to Pittsburgh, right? So how did we do that? So somebody told me they were looking to put a new division, and Pittsburgh was not on the radar. You know, they were looking at Miami and Washington and Minnesota and other places, and I knew somebody on the RAND board, and I said, get us on the list. And they got us on the list. And I flew out with some corporate leaders and said, we'd like to have you think about coming to Pittsburgh, and we'll figure out how to help finance a building for you to be in. And so the president of RAND came out, and in literally a week's notice, I could get the head of both universities, and I could get a half a dozen corporate leaders, U.S. Steel and PPG and PNC Bank, to have a dinner with that person. And he was so impressed with how our community was together in the partnership that we beat all those other fancy cities. And RAND now has almost 500 people working in Pittsburgh. And I could rattle off everything from REI Sports Goods, the Whole Foods, to Google, to a host of other companies that we were able to get to locate in Pittsburgh. But it was about being intentional. And it was about leadership and about saying to people who had said Google would never come to Pittsburgh, to say, you know what, we're going to do it. You need to do that. You need to be intentional about what you want. You have the resources here. You have a great university. You have a great way of life. You need to think about how, in a very intentional way, with great leadership, that you're going to go after what you want. Don't paralyze yourselves. Don't look at that monument of indecision. Don't keep looking at it. Do something. Other questions? Yes?
Can you talk about the importance of moving from nightclub to nightlife as part
Yeah.
of the nightlife management?
And I think there's probably others here better than I am. I think part of it is what we've talked about is a management system that's dealing with what you have. And that starts with the police. And we created that. We had some of the same problems. We called them nuisance bars. And, you know, we went after their license. We set up a system headed up by our district attorney where we collected complaints and arrests. And at some point there was a trigger, and we would say to people, we're going to go after your license if you don't clean your place up. And then there's the lighting, and there's the management of their vacant parking, so you don't have tailgating after the bars close. So there's a management issue there. And then I have always believed where you have problems, you can overwhelm it with good things. Don't paralyze yourself by saying, you know, nobody wants to go downtown because there's crime. Go after reasons why people will want to go downtown. And then at some point, so let me give you a quick example. We have what we call a cultural trust district in Pittsburgh, and if you come, you'll see it. It's about a 5-block by 3-block area. Well, there were 20 years ago, there were 22 massage parlors and strip joints in that area. It was our red light district, active prostitution on the street. Led by one of our foundations, we put a performing arts center there, in the middle of that, okay? And because the foundation had the vision that we could use the arts and culture as a driver. People would come there. And so we created a lot of venues. So now there are 1,500 legitimate performances. I underline legitimate, okay? Performances going on there. The ballet, the opera, the symphony, theater going on there. There's only strip joint, only one strip joint. And I guess every city ought to just have one strip joint, right? But everything else, there's apartments now above the restaurants and galleries. We overwhelm the bad with the good. That's your strategy at the end of the day, not to sort of worry about the crime and paralyze yourself again of doing nothing downtown. You have some good beginnings happening down there. Build on that. Don't get paralyzed by the bad stuff and overwhelm it. Other questions?
Yes, so I run a small company that pairs up artists with venues here in Lafayette, and I have 29 events coming up and 0 in downtown because it's super terrifying approaching it with all the different committees and all the different organizations. And so, specifically, Alita, is it? You talked about having a person specifically in charge of just the go-to downtown person. So would that person also be involved with helping small businesses plant events down there, things like that?
Yes, I think you can do that many different ways, right? And that's the point here, is there is no clear delineation of responsibilities. I'm a fan of the Main Street model, the Main Street approach. It's a national model with different committees, and there's always one point person that is like kind of the downtown go-to for events and promotions. And I think your nonprofit arm or your DDA is currently the closest to what you have doing those services. But yeah, I think that is a very important need, and I think if it's not, should be on that list of the 3 columns of all the different duties. And I think just by saying it here today, by virtue of this many people being in the room, I hope it does rise to the level of at least being part of that conversation.
I'm going to ask Nan, who ran a downtown partnership in Baltimore for a lot of years, and then Nancy to talk about the Performing Arts Center for the prior question that they built. Nan?
Sure. So I am from downtown Baltimore, and effectively, to answer your question directly, there are a lot of ways that you need someone, whether it's whichever organization it is and whether or not it's that sole person, but you do need to have arts as a focus because there's a very different nuanced approach to how you use the arts for economic development purposes and for regeneration of your downtown. So happy to talk with anybody about that and give some pointers that we've had. Nancy has more even hands-on experience than I do with the Performing Arts Center, but Baltimore also had a similar situation where we created the Hippodrome, or we revived the Hippodrome. It was a vaudeville theater in the early 1900s and is now a Broadway Across America Performing Arts Center, and then also has a lot of local performances as well. When that was done, it was not done solely as the Hippodrome. It was a multi-block area that also had restaurants, parking, and retail in it. And then that became, in about 10 years after that, we also identified that as the Bromo Arts and Entertainment District. Feel free to Google it, and again, happy to talk to anyone. You cannot look to one thing to be your solution. It will not work if you just go, well, if we build this big thing, that's gonna be it. It has to be that multi-pronged approach, the same way your downtown has to be incredibly diverse in uses and those folks that you're attracting for work, live, and play. So again, happy to talk further with anybody.
And just adding on to that, in downtown Greenville, much like in Pittsburgh, where the Performing Arts Center went was not the desirable part of downtown. It mimicked what Tom talked about. But it was also done within the context of a mixed-use environment as well. You don't want a center to just be that. It does have to, the Peace Center, and it's called the Peace Center not because it's peaceful, but because the Peace family provided a donation to really kickstart it. There are restaurants, there were offices, there were some historic buildings that were incorporated in the center as well. It has done a tremendous job, not just, as I said, encouraging other development to happen, but really began to change the perception of people coming downtown. At the point that the Peace Center opened, downtown Greenville, which is one of the most active downtowns in the country, was not like that at the time. So it becomes that thing that can really energize a space. And I'll also kind of add to the event, and every city is different. Some cases, as here, some of that is done by a downtown group. In Greenville, we have our own staff of special events. Now, it's not just they run some events, they do, but they also permit and manage how events are done. We became overwhelmed at one point with events. And so we really needed a professional approach to make sure they were managed in a way that was going to be appropriate.
And that goes back to Tom's point of intentionality as well.
Yes.
So it seems that there's been common agreement from you all as consultants, past consultants, the general public, for all of the reasons stated, that the bar moratorium has been an issue for Lafayette.
That what is?
For many, many years. The bar moratorium, quote unquote,
right.
Bar moratorium. In your opinion, what would the approach be? What steps would you take to deal with this, since it's kind of been in a holding pattern and holding things back for so long?
Well, First off, I think it's a zoning issue, and it can be dealt with there. But I think more importantly, what Tom was talking about is it's how it's managed as well. Just to give you an example, in Greenville, bars are not a use by right anywhere, not just downtown, but anywhere, without going through. We've set up a technical advisory group that's composed of, that's set it up by the fire chief, but it's fire, it's police, it's planning, it's zoning, it's economic development. Every bar, and by the way, if a restaurant is open after midnight in Greenville, we consider that a bar as well, because dynamics change a little bit later. They must come before this group at the city, and they have to have their business plan, they have to have their security plan, they have to talk about what is their menu, how are they laying out their tables, everything. It's not just about making sure that they're doing what they say they're going to do, but it's also helping make sure they know what it is they're going to do. So it goes through that process, and then once it's approved, it very much gives the enforcement side of it the opportunity to say at any point when there are violations of that, much like if it becomes you get maybe 1 or 2 times, but then if it becomes a nuisance, it's revoked. So you're rewarding the good behavior of those who do it right, and then you're making the consequences of those who don't lose their ability. It's a privilege, and I think that's one thing you have to think about. Doing business, it's a privilege, and you have to be responsible.
So I can.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah.
We can, and we'll talk to that in greater detail. And again, are available. I think it's very important. When I was in the mayor's office in Baltimore, we went after an 800-person nightclub, and when you tackle things that way, and I've been through it in other organizations as well. When you go after a specific group, you shoot yourself in the foot from the very start. You cannot target one individual business. There are so many issues that come into play with that, and I think we all want to avoid that for you. So what I highly recommend, and it's my understanding you already have some different things going on with the new zoning code and with the liquor license laws, come up with a plan and start, utilize the tools you already have and the legislation you already have. Evaluate what mechanisms you can use. I always, and I think Nancy and I talked quite a bit about this, as did others, start with the fire marshal. If you have building occupancy issues, and you have 1,500 people in a building that can only hold 1,000, that is your boom, right there. And if that means your fire marshal has to stand there and count every night that place is open, who goes in and does that, then that's what you need to do. But you need to do it at every single place, not just one. So really take advantage and look at the issues that you can do. Enforcement across the board, and being very deliberate and communicative about what you're doing. Again, without just targeting one location, you're very communicative that you're doing this as not just about safety of crime, but also the safety of those who are going and behaving themselves from a building standpoint or otherwise. It's very important. The other thing is, one of what we did, we had a horrible nightclub in downtown Baltimore. We had shootings, we had stabbings, we had prostitution, you name it, and it was in this gorgeous old bank building. And you can Google Chesapeake Shakespeare Company. That's the punchline of the story here. You can Google Chesapeake Shakespeare Company and see just how amazing that building is. But we had repetitive problems. We first tried to go after them with police enforcement and liquor license enforcement, and it turned into a disaster for our organization because we were targeted as being racist and not wanting people downtown, et cetera. It was a bad situation. We changed our tactic. We went out and enforced citywide, downtown-wide, but then we also went to the property owner and we said, we're going to bring you somebody new and we're going to figure this out. How long is your lease? How much more time do you have on this building? You have to understand that property owners need to make money, and they're not just in it for goodwill, but they don't want to deal with you nagging them either. So you need to go help them, and that goes back to that all of you need to be working together to bring new tenants, and it can't just be, well, he's not doing it right. It has to be, hey, we have an idea for you, and we're here to help use some of those tools that Lex and Tyrone talked about. Did you know you could use this, this, and this? So provide solutions and not just smacking people down for doing the wrong thing.
So how do you make it happen? That's about leadership. I think this is a management issue for your city. And it takes, I think, the mayor and the mayor's staff to say, this, we're not going to put up with this anymore. We're going to set forward a solution. There's lots of examples of how that happens around the country, but it is a manageable issue. Don't
Big clubs. I went downtown the other day. I don't know how much y'all got to walk around because it rained, but there's 6 empty buildings in a row because everybody's sitting in speculation mode because you're not going to open quaint new places and invite these people to come in because there's a moratorium and there's no current mechanism for those buildings to be filled with.
I think the moratorium was an easy way out for you guys because you didn't want to deal with the management issues. So we have recommended you eliminate the moratorium and essentially be serious about managing downtown. Other questions? We don't want to keep you. One more question.
I'd like to focus on neighborhoods around downtown because I think that's what's going to connect people to it. As a St. Streets resident, I'm curious why it was removed from the 4 and it became 3 because of the Lord's property, because it's the connector of downtown to the Cajun Dome and Cajun Field.
Which one?
St. Streets, I'll take that one.
Yeah.
Probably ignorance, geographical ignorance on our part. It certainly could be, you could make it 4 neighborhoods instead of the 3. I think the mayor knows his city much better than we do, and if that's what makes sense, then that Lafayette Community Development Corporation could encompass all 4 neighborhoods.
And let me just say, those neighborhoods, I think, in many cases are good already, but they represent a huge opportunity for your community because they're the kind of places that people, young families and others would love to live in singles, okay? And you're an example of that, I'm assuming. So we want to thank all of you for your patience to listen to us. You have to understand that, we came here on Sunday. Most of us have never been here, and we didn't know each other. And we bonded, and we'd like to think that we've challenged you to think about the opportunities here, and then to be intentional about how you're going to go forward and to recognize that we believe the mayor is ready to go forward, but he's going to need support when those people come with their tomatoes. Okay? So we again want to thank Carly. She's the one who organized all this, and to the mayor for your leadership. Thank you very much.
Thanks. So in addition to worrying every time it rains now, I'm going to add to my list of worries that some graffiti artist is going to put Monument of Indecision across the federal courthouse every Friday or Saturday night. And then till Sunday I'll wake up and have to drive downtown to see if it actually happened or not. There you go. So again, on behalf of everybody that's here and the citizens of Lafayette, a huge thank you. The amount of time and effort and the quality of work that y'all are presenting us with is really incredible. And we originated this idea, I think, when Carly and I had gone on a trip and met Catherine. Where's Catherine? She's probably hiding. There's Catherine. With the Urban Land Institute to talk about some of our needs. And we had just come off of the big August floods. And so, I was trying to figure out, how do we get people to move to the historic part of the city? That's where, this city was founded, and it was mostly, at least if not just in part, because it was the highest ground. And it makes sense that we do whatever we can to encourage that type of development. And coincidentally, at the same time, we had this underdeveloped downtown. And so those two things make perfect sense. On the heels of that, we've had this parish budget problem, which is in desperate need, and y'all touched on our dysfunctional consolidated government, which is absolutely true, Denise. And so we're trying to figure out that parish piece of the budget, and we don't have the opportunity for developable space like we have downtown anywhere else. I mean, there's underutilized and vacant properties in the parish. The city obviously benefits from that, but the parish benefits significantly from that development, and that's a huge economic driver and solution that's out there that the parish residents should look at and normally say, well, I don't care about downtown, I don't go downtown. But what we're trying to get them to the point is where they say, but we definitely need to develop it because we need those parish tax dollars. And so I think the work that y'all have done will help me get that message across. And so thank you for that. Last thing is, Tom, I want to give you a key to the city so that when you come back, you can get into wherever you need to get into. And so everybody, if you would, join me in thanking everyone plus Tom while I present Tom with the key to the city of Lafayette.
It's a big key, too. Okay. Thank you. No, you need to use this key to get this turn yourself out.
And I know that y'all have plane flights and all, so they may grab you as you walk out, but thank you very much. Thank everybody for coming. It is going to take all of us to get something done. Thanks.